The next few shiurim we'll do now from the Chatzar of 770. So you get some of the Kedusha in there too. So the Rebbe is explaining in the Maimer the idea of Iker Shchina Batachtoinim Haisa. Now the simple meaning, Iker Shchina, means the main Shchina. But there's no such thing as a main Shchina, a secondary Shchina. So when we talk about Iker Shchina, so the Rebbe is understanding and explaining to us that Iker Shchina means a level of Shchina. Iker Shchina doesn't just mean the main Shchina, but it's a certain aspect of the Shchina that was in the Tachtoinim. So in order to understand what Iker Shchina B'Tachtoinim, what Iker Shchina is, so Rebbe says we first have to understand what Shchina is. And in explaining it, so the Rebbe talks about and brings from each one of the Rabbeim how they explain Shchina. Now when we learn from each one of the Rabbeim, besides for explaining what each one is, what it would seem obvious is that when we're bringing from each one of the Rabbeim, since we say that each one of the Rabbeim brought the Shechina closer, so the explanation of Shechina, the way each Rebbe explains it, is bringing it and expresses how it's brought closer to this world. So again, yesterday we learned the idea of Kutsha Brichu and Shchinte. That means there's what's higher than the world, and Shechina is what comes down into the world. Now we're seeing how the Rabbeim, that their mission was to bring the Shechina down into this world, how they explain the Shechina, which is by their explanation. Chabad is explaining the ideas, and through the explaining it, they explained it and actually brought it down into our minds and into the world as a result of how they did it. So let's look at the Rabbeim. First, there's the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is the Sfira of Chachma. Sometimes we say the Sfira of Chesed. They're both connected, but the idea, the general idea, is the Sfira of Chachma. The Mittler Rebbe is the Sfira of Bina. The difference between Chachma and Bina, Chachma is the essence of the Seichel. Chachma is the idea itself. For example, if I'm learning something, Chachma is the flash of wisdom that comes, the concept itself. Or Chachma also, when I learn something in a Sefer, I read it, the idea itself, that's Chachma. Bina is when I understand it, when I bring it more into my mind, into my understanding. At the same time, because Chachma is the idea itself, it actually includes everything. Because the idea itself includes all the concepts that will later be expressed in the idea. And it's the same thing, the Alter Rebbe, who began to bring a Lakus into the world, and similar to what we spoke yesterday about Avraham Avinu, that Avraham Zacha, Avraham refined the world. Avraham came to the world which was a jungle, and he started, he was mechadesh the idea. He brought this new concept that the world is actually not a jungle, and it's actually a Lakus. He started it all. Everything that follows all comes from Avraham Avinu. Even Moshe Rabbeinu the seventh, it all started from Avraham Avinu, from Avraham's bringing this idea in the world. It's all included in Avraham. Same thing with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe came into a world which was a jungle. The Alter Rebbe came into a world which in Pnimius, Avraham and Moshe already brought it and brought a Lukus into the world. But now in Pnimius, in the inner essence, the idea of actually understanding about the Eibishter in the world in a way that it actually comes into our minds was something which didn't exist. The Alter Rebbe started it. The Alter Rebbe started with Chassidus Chabad, started to explain and bring down Shechina, Elokus, into the world. How? Through Chachma. The essence. Later on, all the Mamarim of Chassidus of all the Rabbeim, and like we'll see, each one of them brought it a level further, but it all starts and it's all included in that beginning, in that start of the Alter Rebbe. So we see, what does the Alter Rebbe say about Shechina? The Alter Rebbe says Shechina is, he explains the general idea. Everything that follows and all the other Rabbeim that we're going to learn after, they're all included in the general description described by the Alter Rebbe. It's all based and it's all there in that general description. What's the general description? That Shechina is called Shechina because Shechenes umislabeshes. Shechina means, as the Rebbe brings the Reishis, is Galus of Ein Sof, the beginning of Ein Sof, Hashem's light revealing itself down here. The beginning of when it starts to reveal itself, which means before it reveals itself, that's Kodesh B'richu. When it starts to be revealed, Hashem's light into the world, the light of Hashem in the world, that's called Shechina. And that's why it's called Shechina from the word Mishachanti B'Seicham, which means that Hashem says, I will reside in the world. That's the Beis HaMikdash. That Hashem doesn't just stay higher than the world. He says, I'm coming into the world. That's Shechina, Hashem's ability to come down into the world. Shechenes umislabeshes. It resides, it comes, it's shechen, it rests, and it comes down into the physical world. That's called Shechina, and that's the Reishis is Galus Ein Sof, the beginning of when Hashem's light starts to be revealed in the world. That's called Shechina. So that's the general idea of everything that's Shechina, the beginning of this is Galus. That's the Alter Rebbe. Now the Rebbe continues from the Mittel Rebbe that the Reishis Hayis Galus. That means if we're saying that the Alter Rebbe is saying the beginning of the Hashem's revealing Himself in the world. And it's an interesting thing because in the Alter Rebbe's explanation, we seem to have actually two opposites here. On one hand, we say it's Shechenes u'mislabeshes. It comes down into the world, which means that's the lowest level. That's what actually comes into the world. Like we say, the Elokus that comes into the Mishkan, that comes into the Gashmis of the world. On the other hand, we say Reishis is Galus Ein Sof. The highest level, the beginning of Hashem revealing Himself in the world is called Shechina. And that's taka why it's like that, because the Alter Rebbe is including everything. It's all there. But now the Rebbe is going on to explain it more specifically. That if we say that the Reishis is Galus of Ein Sof is called Shechina, that means Shechina is in the highest place possible. Higher even than Atzilus. Because Atzilus, even Atzilus, which is Elokus, is still Hashem revealing Himself in the world. And even above Atzilus, there's the level of where Hashem reveals Himself in the world. So on the one hand, we said Shechenes u'mislabeshes, it's what comes into the world. On the other hand, it's the highest level. It's the Reishis Hayis Galus. And that's from the word Reishis Hayis Galus, that means it's in the highest level. And for this, the Rebbe brings what the Mittel Rebbe says. Let's first see what the Mittel Rebbe says and then try and understand it a little more. The Mittel Rebbe says that the ha'ara of Kav and Chut compared to Atzmius Ein Sof is called Shechina. What does that mean, the ha'ara of Kav and Chut? When Hashem made the world, Hashem started off, there's Hashem's light everywhere. That's the reality of the world. And in fact, nothing ever changed from that. That is the real reality. And even though there's the tzimtzum, which means Hashem moved His light away, that's all only outwardly. That's all only the way it seems to us. But the reality is that the real truth is that Hashem is everywhere. Not only Hashem is everywhere, Hashem's light is everywhere. We'll maybe go into explaining that a little bit more with Hashem later, that there's a difference between when we say Hashem is everywhere and Hashem's light is everywhere. For example, when I'm going to say that there's the sun, then the sun has a shine. There's the sun, that's the mo'ir, that's the source. But the fact that there's a source, that means something shines, a light comes out of it. That's all in Gashmis. It's not a thing which is necessary in Hashem, that He should have a shine. What does it mean, a shine of Hashem? Hashem's not a light, He's not the sun. The shine of Hashem means there's Hashem and there's the ability for Him to be perceived by something else. But by definition, Hashem, there's no ability, there's no necessity that there should be an ability. On the contrary, before there was a world, there was nothing else to perceive Hashem. So there was no light, there was no shine, there was just Hashem, the essence of Hashem, nothing else. Now, something which we're going to go more into later is that when Hashem decided that He's going to make a world with creations, even in the highest levels of creations, but that they'll have some way of perceiving Him, that's when He decided to make a light. that means that there should be not just Hashem himself, which is something which is beyond anybody being able to have any connection to, but that there should be a light, a shine, an ability to connect to godliness, to connect to Hashem. By definition, before there's a world, Hashem is everywhere. If the sun was everywhere, there wouldn't be able to be the shine of the sun. There would be just the sun. Before there was an existence of the world, Hashem was everywhere, so there's also no ability for there to be a light. Now, even afterwards, Hashem is still everywhere. So how can there be a light? That's something which, by definition, isn't able to exist. For that, there had to be something called a tzimtzum. And that's not the tzimtzum arishin that we talk about, but that's something we'll discuss later. Chassidus doesn't talk so much about it. It's more in Kabbalah. The Rebbe does bring it down more than once, although it's something which usually Chassidus doesn't talk about, because Chassidus talks only once there's a light. Before there's a light, it has nothing to do with us. Chassidus is only discussing things which deal with people, which deal with us, and with our ability to understand Hashem. Before there was even a light, we have no connection to that place. So Chassidus only deals with the tzimtzum arishin once there is a light. But the Rebbe does talk about this first tzimtzum, which the first tzimtzum is the fact that Hashem enabled there to be a light. So now, you have that light of Hashem. Hashem then removes the light, because as long as Hashem's revelation is everywhere, there can't be a world. The world means a place where Hashem is not felt, where Hashem's existence is not felt. If Hashem is revealed, is understood, perceived, felt, then there is no world. So in order to make a world, the first thing you have to do is move the light aside. But he didn't really move the light aside. He moved the light aside only compared to the world. So that's something which we'll discuss more. That's what tzimtzum is. But tzimtzum is the loik of pshuta, which means even now, when there's a world, the reality that Hashem is here in full, not just existence, but in full revelation everywhere. Now, the world and all the elements, starting from the world of Atzilus and even higher than Atzilus, until down here, the lowest world, but everything comes from Hashem's light. So Hashem removed the light, but then he took a kav katsar, which means he brought out a ray of light, sort of like you would be shining a laser beam, by a way of example. You'd be shining a laser beam, which it just shines, it's one ray, one beam of light. Now we're talking about the light of godliness, which isn't light. It's not physical light, but it means revelation of Hashem. Hashem shown that revelation to come down into the worlds, where in Atzilus there's more of it, meaning it's more revealed. In Bria there's less revelation of Hashem, in Yitzira even less, and in Asiya almost nothing. But it's from that godly light which he created a world until even the physical world. That's called the Kav. So the Kav is the Reishis is Galos Ein Sof. We deal with after Tzimtzum. We deal with after Hashem removed his light away from the world and he started to shine his light into the world. And that is after Tzimtzum. And the beginning of this Galos of Ein Sof is in Kav. So that's what we're saying. Compared to Atzmius Ein Sof, to the light of Hashem, which is from before Tzimtzum. The Kav, which is revealing Hashem's light into the world, is called Shechina because it's there in order to come into the world. That's what the Middle Rebbe explained. Now it's an interesting thing. The Middle Rebbe, like we said, is Bina. Bina means understanding. The Kav, the light which comes into the world, understands. The Alter Rebbe is the idea, the essence. The Middle Rebbe is explaining the concept. So it's taking it to the next level. We're taking it down closer. The Alter Rebbe is a general idea, and the Middle Rebbe is already bringing it closer. Now, an interesting concept taken from, actually, Basi Legani, from this year's Basi Legani Tafshin Lamed Zayin, is that the Rebbe explains the difference between Chachma and Bina. On one hand, Bina is more understood. It's more explained. It's more connected to the world. That's why the Middle Rebbe's Chassidus was a lot longer. It was a lot more explaining the ideas that are in the Alter Rebbe's Chassidus. On the other hand, there's a difference that Chachma is like seeing. Seeing comes even into the physical, it comes all the way down. Hearing is understanding, that's Bina, understanding it, that still connects more to the spiritual. And that's why it says in the Arizal that Yosef was a Yosem from his mother. Yosef didn't have a mother. Yosef is the Sphira of Yesod, that's the lowest of the Sphiras. But there's no mother, it doesn't connect, Bina doesn't reach till Yesod. Only Chachma goes all the way down to Yesod. Why? Because Chachma is like seeing it. Chachma is the thing itself goes throughout. That's why the Alter Rebbe's explanation, Shechina, is Shechenes M'Sabeshes, it goes even into the lowest level. The Middle Rebbe on one hand is understanding it more, but it remains more in spiritual, and that's why it doesn't go all the way down. It still remains a little bit up, which we'll explain in Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow.